Hello students, this is a revision screencast for Literature Paper 2 for the Edexcel certificate in English Literature. This paper is divided into two parts. The entire paper lasts 1 hour and 30 minutes. Section A, they will give you a piece of poetry that you've not seen before. They will also give you a piece of prose that you have not seen before. You choose which one of those to answer. That question is worth 20 marks. And you should take 45 minutes to answer the question. Section B is on Anthology C poetry. All 16 of those poems you need to know. They will give you two questions and you choose which one to answer. In that question, you will have to write about 2 poems, which is why you need to know all of the poems in Anthology C. It's also worth 20 marks, and you should also spend 45 minutes on this section. Now, Section A, Unseen. I know it's a bit scary, but don't get scared now. You have the skills that you need. First of all, let's remember how you're going to be marked. Okay? You're going to use its PEARL. So PEARL paragraphs, point, evidence, analysis, reader, the effect on the reader, and link back to the question. You're going to be analyzing the language, the structure, and the form, and you're going to emphasize the ideas, the themes, and the settings of the text. Now, this was the January 2014 exam. To give you an idea, students could choose to read the poem, which was The Road Not Taken, and then answer this question: how does the writer convey the importance of making decisions? And they have bullet points there that they want you to follow. Or you could have answered the prose question, which was an extract from The Kite Runner, excellent novel, by the way, and the question, which was explain how the writer creates excitement, and again, they wanted you to use those bullet points. Now, steps to success. I advise my students on top of the paper to write down the time that they need to finish the first part, so 45 minutes after the exam begins, because there is no one in the room to tell you it's been 45 minutes, move on, so you have to time yourself. So, first steps, okay, take the first 10 minutes, read the question, read the poem, reread the question, and then annotate the poem for anything that will help you answer the question. And then you need to plan your answer. Break it down into 3 main sections that you're going to talk about. Make sure that you've got evidence to answer each one of the bullet points. So that's going to take you a good 10 minutes. Next section is actually write your answer. So 30 minutes to write your answer. And then do take 5 minutes or so to edit your answer. Make sure that you've highlighted the ideas, the themes, the setting. I think it's good to actually use those keywords in your answer as well. Now, take a look at these 3 past exam questions. I'm going to work with the poetry because that's what my classes have been working with. Explain how the writer creates sympathy for the old woman. Consider descriptive skills, language, form, and structure. Consider this poem carefully. Write about it as fully as you can. So this is a bit more vague, but they do give you the bullet points. Or this one, consider it carefully. Write about poet's attitude, descriptive skills, language, effect on you, any other aspects. So what's similar in all of these past exam questions? You need to know what the poet's attitude towards the subject is. You focus on the description, you focus on the language, and you focus on the effect on you, the reader. That's why we advise you to use PEARL. To figure out all of these things, you use SLIME. You look at the structure, then you add in the language. You look at the imagery, you think about the meaning, and you think about the effect. So, your turn now. So the question is, consider the poem carefully. Talk about attitude, descriptive skills, language, effect. Here's the poem I'd like you to work with. It's called In Paris with You. So, pause this now, and then when you're ready to continue, hit play. All right, so you've read the poem, or you've skipped over it because you're lazy. Or because you've already read it before in my class's point of view. So, remembering the question down here in the corner of the screen, here are some of the things that I noticed from the poem. Now, I always start off by thinking about what the overall tone, attitude of the poem is, and I think it's mostly negative. They use some informal, some harsh language. The overall effect is I feel a bit sorry for the persona. It also makes me grateful for my current relationship because it's a good one, and in the poem it's not a good one. And I also notice repetition. The persona focuses on the present and rather than the past, so they just want to move past the past. So down at the corner you see the different things that I've noticed. So I've decided that I'm going to have an introduction, then I'm going to focus on the negative attitude, such as in don't talk to me, which contrasts with Paris, which is supposed to be the city of love. There's lots of imperatives, such as don't. I'm also going to talk about the informal and harsh/rude language and think about what the effects are. Do we like the persona, or perhaps we dislike the persona, but we also find it a bit funny? And then also talking about the structure, the repetitive phrases, the one-sided dialogue. What about this other person? Do they get a chance to explain his or herself? And then the possible effect. Now, if you'll notice, all three of these main paragraphs that I've decided to write tie in to the bullet points of the actual question. Don't ignore the bullet points. They want you to follow them. So here's my introduction. This poem is unusual in its treatment of love, a frequent topic in poetry, as it provides a negative portrayal which reveals its overall message that heartbreak is painful and difficult to overcome. Now, message, you could take out that word and use the word idea, and that way you would already be telling the examiner that you're talking about the ideas of the poem, which is part of the mark scheme. Now, here's a sample Pearl paragraph. Up on the right-hand side, you see what the focus of this paragraph is, the structure and the effect. And then here is my very colorful Pearl paragraph. I've color-coded it so that you can see at the different points the evidence, the analysis, the effect on the reader is in orange, and then the link back to the question. So the poem is presented as a one-sided dialogue, key words, I'm underlining it, between the persona and his lover, repetitive imperative of don't talk to me about Paris is rude. Now if you'll notice, I've just put a very short example from the poem. You don't have time. They're not going to be impressed with you if you add in all of this evidence from the poem and don't analyze it. So make sure that you do that. Here's the next bit. We can imagine the other side of the conversation in which the lover is trying to convey his or her point of view, as she or he does not receive the opportunity and is instead told that they are going to be stuck in, quote, a sleazy hotel room and say, quote, sod off to sodding Notre Dame, an attraction that most people would visit in the setting, keyword, look at me examiner, I'm awesome, of the city of love. The reader may feel offended on the lover's behalf. Alternatively, the reader may have experienced heartbreak at one point and therefore feel sympathetic for the persona who's overcoming the heartbreak. Regardless of the effect on the reader, the overall attitude, as revealed in the structure, is negative. Now, obviously, you don't have to underline these things when you write them for the examiner. I've just underlined them so that you can see what I'm doing with this Pearl. All right, another question. Explain how the poet uses language to express her thoughts and ideas. Now, start off by thinking, okay, what are the main ideas? You can't just jump into the description, jump into the language, jump into the structure. You've got to think about what the main ideas are first. My class was using this question with a poem called Field of Autumn. Be good revision for you if you've not done that yet. Just Google that poem, find the poem, and then try to answer the question. Make sure that you do it in timed conditions, without your phone turned on, without watching TV, etc., etc. If you're looking for other poems, this is a good website to just find just random poems to practice a question with. Let's move on to section B of the poem, Anthology C, Poetry. Right. Reminder, the mark scheme, it's the same for the first part of the exam. So you're talking about ideas, themes, and settings, looking at language and structure. Here's the January 2014 exam. You could choose from one of these questions. How are views of death presented in Do Not Go Gentle and Remember? Or show how the poets convey their thoughts and feelings about life in poem at 39, and then one other poem, and you get to choose that other poem. Now, first thing to think about, how are the views of death? Well, you can't explain how the views of death are before you think about what are the views of death in the poem. So that's how you start. Think about, turn the how into a what. What are the views of death and Do Not Go Gentle? Then, what is the poet saying about death? What are we learning about death? Then you can look at the how. How are they presented through language and structure and SCSI? Remember, SCSI is setting, characters, actions, etc. So that hits the keywords of setting and ideas. And then you think about why. Why are those devices used? What does the poet want to present, and what is the effect on the reader? So use the what, how, why method. So what the poet is saying about death and Do Not Go Gentle, and remember. each point that you come up with 3 points, then becomes a pearl. Okay, you get to decide the structure for your essay. You can do one of two things. You can have a paragraph about do not go gentle and the views of death, talking about structure and language, and then a paragraph about remember, talking about structure and language and how they present death. Or you could decide that you want to compare within the paragraph. So you'd have a paragraph about the structure and what it says about death. And in that structure paragraph, you would talk about do not go gentle, and you would compare it to remember. And then you would have another paragraph or two about language and what it says about death. And you would talk about do not go gentle in that paragraph, and you would also talk about remember. It's completely up to you how you structure the essay. But this is why it's important to plan. Plan, plan, plan. Okay, the other question. Show how the poets convey their thoughts and feelings about life. Again, we need to know, what are the poet's thoughts and feelings about life? Start off by thinking about, is it positive or is it negative? Then turn that into how, looking at language and structure. Then think about why they've done those things and what the effect is on the reader. Now, a few reminders. For a star, make a very specific point in your introduction, such as, both Poem at 39 and Mother in Refugee Camp shows relationship between parent and child, but in completely different ways. One explores a child missing her father, the other a mother weeping for her child. This is a paragraph that was answering the question, talk about two poems that talk about the relationship between parents and children. Also, remember what you need to include. It's pearls, okay? Language and structure, ideas, themes, and setting. Here's a revision idea for you. You could take a poem, think about the ideas, themes, and settings of that poem, and then the comparisons to other poems. And if you made this little graph for each poem, you'd have a good idea of all 16 poems. Best of luck. Hope you do really well. Add a star.